Hello and welcome back to another episode of Woman Heal Podcast, a sacred space where we bridge the gap between spirituality and mental wellness. As y'all know, our mission is simple but powerful, right? To curate conversations that help women heal, transform, and pivot in life and business. I am your host, Coach Carla, aka Coach C. And today we have a powerful conversation with a phenomenal woman who is making history in the holistic mental health space, right? I also want to say that recently, y'all, I checked our analytics for the podcast and noticed that our listeners reside in the United States, Canada, Australia, Germany, which is where I was born, whoop, whoop, Germany, South Africa, Jamaica, Bermuda, and the United Kingdom. So let's just give God glory for that. Like, wow, we're able to, because that was my heart. Like, God, I want us to become a generation of healers where we pass down healing versus trauma, right? And I also noticed that our listeners are between the ages overall, like a large part of you guys are between the ages of 45 and 59. So I was like, okay, we seasoned over here, right? So yes, yes, yes. Again, we are a seasoned group of women committed to personal growth and inner healing. Now, y'all know that as a holistic success strategist, right, who specializes in trauma-informed coaching, I am truly passionate about mental health and taking care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. So, joining me for today's conversation about holistic mental health, social justice, and equitable spiritual care is a woman who is truly shifting culture, Dr. Calynn Lawrence. Hey, friend.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing wonderful. I am doing very well. Just let me give y'all a little bit of information about. Did I say your name right?
Yes, you did. Thank
Okay.
you.
Dr. Kaylin. I was like, that don't seem hard. Okay. And guess what, y'all? Dr. Kaylin Lawrence. She might be my cousin, okay?
Yes, Carla Lawrence.
That's right. So, Dr. Lawrence is the founder of the Holistic Healing Source for Marginalized Community Society, a world record-setting initiative, and she's just launched a free library of spirit-led mental health focused ebooks. But what makes this conversation even more meaningful to me is that Dr. Kaylin and I both live with MDD, and that is major depressive disorder, right? And so we're going to share openly about that journey in hopes that our transparency helps someone listening feel seen, supported, and inspired. So y'all are in for a treat. Help me again. Welcome, Dr. Kaylin. Welcome to the Woman Hill Podcast. Take a moment. You can greet the people in your own way, and then we will dive in.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. As she said, I am the founder of the Holistic Healing Source for Marginalized Society, holistichealingsource.org. If you want to check out any of our many free resources, advocacy content, professional training, the library of free books. And I am super excited to delve into what it's like dealing with chronic mental health conditions as a Black woman from both the practitioner standpoint. I'm a faith-based therapist, a pastoral counselor with a specialty in trauma, and also as the individual who's receiving services. So I'm
Mhm.
happy to be here.
Well-rounded. I love that. So I know if y'all are listening, y'all like, okay, wait, this sounds a little heavy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna begin with what I call rapid fire questions, Dr. Caitlin, if that's okay. Right?
Yes.
So we're gonna have a little bit of fun. So real quick, if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would it be?
Bold, passionate, um, dedicated.
Love it. Bold, passionate, dedicated. What's your go-to comfort food when you've had a long day?
I love, I'd say my favorites are some good ice cream. I love some good barbecue and maybe some good pasta.
Yes, all of that. And pasta, I love pasta, but pasta don't love me, honey. It sticks to me.
Me
Mine
too.
is definitely ice cream and honey. Don't y'all judge me, but it is something about some McDonald's French fries that when they
Yes.
real hot, got, a little salt on it, it just hits the spot. It just makes me feel so much better.
Yes.
All
Me
right,
too.
so are you an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, early bird. I am a big
Okay.
morning person.
All right. I used to be. It's like I done turned into a little night owl. I don't know what happened. What song is currently on repeat in your playlist?
I'd say Thankful I Found You by Mariah Carey, Joe, and I think 98 Degrees.
Look
It's
at
an old
you.
song.
Okay. The song I currently have on repeat is Grateful by Lisa Page Brooks. The Grateful Chant. Have you heard that?
I haven't.
Anybody grateful? Anybody grateful? You say it. That's my girl. I love her. I love Lisa Page Brooks. So check it out when you get a chance. It's called The Grateful Chant.
I will.
What's one item you can't leave the house without?
Outside of like the necessities, hand sanitizer. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, so like I like having hand sanitizer. If I touch the gas pump, if I'm going out to eat, I like having it.
I am the same way. I would just say my cell phone, honey. If I have to have that phone, because first of all, I live in Charlotte, so the GPS I still need it to connect it to my car, depending on where I'm going. Okay, got it. What is one self-care practice that you implement every single day?
I like to have a decent skincare routine, and taking my vitamins. So vitamins and having a decent little skincare, that's what I like to do every single day.
Yes, me too. I don't even have nothing to add. We align. I love it. Last question. What is one of your favorite all-time books to read and revisit? And Dr. Calynn, do not say the Bible, because that's like automatic. I'm messing with you.
That's true. That's true. I honestly, this is gonna sound kind of crazy, but I think my journals,
Mm.
because like I buy journals where they have like the little, it's buried over here somewhere, the little prompts in them for you to work from, which
Hmm.
was inspiration for launching the library. And I like to go back and read my drafts sometimes.
I love that. Okay, and speaking of journals, I just launched a empowerment journal line series. So make sure you check it out on my website, y'all, carlakennelawrence.com. So you got the self-love. These don't have prompts, these are more free writing. So I use them. Sometimes people think journaling is just, or a journal is just for your thoughts. I mean, I write my vision, my prayers, ideas that I have. So you got this one, then I have this one.
Oh, I
And
love
this
that.
one, and I intentionally put black girls on the cover. I
I
was
was
very
just gonna say, I love the Black girls.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So for me, there are days where it can feel like carrying a weight that no one else can see, right? So what are some of the ways, like tell us about your journey with MDD. Like, I don't know if you got to take us back with major depressive disorder. Like, how did that show up in your life? How did you manage it? Just feel free in whatever way you want to share that, and we'll go from there.
Well, I got diagnosed with as being clinically depressed when I was 14. I unfortunately had a suicide attempt my 14th birthday, due to a lot of unfortunate events that had happened to me that I wasn't at the time able to come out and openly share. So I internalized that and let it stew, which led to me being depressed to the point of wanting to end my life. And I then from there was on several antidepressants and psych meds, all throughout my teenagehood, and going to therapy, which at that time wasn't super helpful. It helped stabilize me enough to where like I didn't have another attempt for quite a while, but it
Hmm.
wasn't as beneficial as it could have been, because since I was still a child at the time, I came from a fairly strict household, overly religious in some ways family. So, like, I wasn't comfortable sharing everything with my therapist until I was an adult.
Hmm.
So, when I then became an adult and I was like able to get my own therapist and, had my career going in my early 20s, unfortunately, my life fell apart financially, emotionally, spiritually. It was a lot going on, from horrible, abusive relationships that overlapped with the collapse of my faith journey, which led to my deconstruction due to a lot of drama at my then congregation and other congregations within that same denomination, losing a lot of friends and even a lot of tension with family members who did not stand by me in the way that I would have hoped they would have throughout that. So all of those things were happening at once. I went back into heavy therapy, but with a new therapist. And eventually, after probably close to a decade of being in and out of therapy and on and off meds, they diagnosed me with major depressive disorder when they realized like this is a chronic thing. This isn't just circumstantial or environmental.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've had a couple of more therapists that I shifted throughout different points in my life because at different points in my life, I need different things in a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been on and off meds depending on the severity of my depression. For the last couple of years, I've been, pretty okay. And now I'm at a point where, I finished school. I passed my board certs in trauma as a trauma specialist. I got my doctorate in faith-based counseling. Thank you. And now with the holistic healing source, I'm going around like trying to educate and empower people to stabilize their own mental health.
Mm-hmm. You said so much, girl. I had to write something down because I want to unpack that. That was so good. I love it. First of all, kudos to you, Law. Let's take a moment and celebrate Dr. Calynn because a lot of times with our trauma and the things that we encounter, everybody doesn't make it out. Right?
They don't.
Unscathed. Everyone doesn't make it out. So I want to go back to your childhood. When you say I was diagnosed with MDD, and y'all, when we say MDD, we're talking about major depressive disorder. It's so long. So going forward, we're probably just going to say MDD. I know I will. Um, so when you were 14 years old, you were diagnosed with MDD. The reason I'm about to ask you a question, and the reason I'm gonna ask this question is because I remember as a kid, like was it elementary, middle school? I can't even remember. It's just early on. I was diagnosed with ADD. I was diagnosed with behavior, saying they said I was behaviorally, emotionally handicapped, said it was BEH, told me I had an incapability of getting along with other people. You can imagine how that affected my life. Those are all labels that was put on us. I was put on Ritalin as a kid, going to see a therapist. I'll never forget Miss Simon Thomas. And I'm like, but nothing was explained. So I know for me, I come from a family where I'm the baby. I have an older sister who's 4 years, we're 4 years apart. And I just always felt like something was wrong with me. I always felt like I was crazy. Family members would often say like, "Why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you be?" So it was that constant comparison. So it was just a lot of trauma, a lot of the anxiety, nail biting, all of that. And I wasn't diagnosed with MDD until a couple of years ago. That's another conversation. But what was that like for you as a kid? With this diagnosis, was it explained to you? Did you have support? What were you going? Do you remember what you were feeling or thinking or what that process was like for you?
Well, I'm first of all, I want to say I'm sorry you had that experience. That sounds very hard as a child. And our mental health system has come quite a way since we
Mm-hmm.
were kids. However, it's still a long way to go. But for me, see, for me, I feel like it was a little bit of a process because when they first admitted me and I was first like hospitalized and stuff at 14, they just thought I was clinically depressed, but they thought it was circumstantial or environmental. So they're like, oh, okay, this is, like a temporary thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it did ostracize me a little bit from my peers because I didn't know anybody else who had tried to take their own life at that point. Not at least not so young. I didn't know anybody else who experienced that. So it did ostracize me a bit. Um, but I will say that one, having a mom who was studying psychology, she has her bachelor's and master's in psychology. So she was studying psychology at the time. So she had a little bit of like knowledge as to like some of the stuff that was going on, and she was able to like normalize it a little bit for me. So it didn't feel so like off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
But it was difficult because like the only thing I had ever heard of prior to me being hospitalized was people who had like intellectual or academic like learning disabilities, but not
Mm-hmm.
people who had like mental health disabilities
Mm-hmm.
where it was emotional. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, like, and then I got a lot of feedback like from like some people in my circle, like elders in my circle, where because of their ignorance they didn't recognize that psychology is a very broad thing, and just because you may be academically strong, because I mean I was valedictorian and all of this kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
so like they were like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Like I literally had people telling me I just tried to kill myself for show or just for attention, and they're like, because there's no way something can be wrong with you and you're so smart. And that probably hurt me more than anything because I'm like, I didn't have the terminology or the scientific knowledge at the point, but I'm like,
Mhm.
I am sad to the point where I don't want to be here anymore. It's not about me being smart and being on honor roll. So it was hard.
And I feel like that too, our stories align because I was the same way. Like I was actually the BEH, the behaviorally emotionally handicapped. I was placed in a BEH class. So imagine being a kid where you are
Oh,
smart as all get out. You have a high IQ, but you are literally in a class where somebody over there could be slobbering. Like they really like you they have what's the proper term these days? Help me out, Dr. Calynn, because we used
developmentally
to say like
delayed.
mental retardation. Do we still say that? Just like homelessness, we don't say homelessness anymore. We say unhomed or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, they could be developmentally or cognitively delayed or impaired.
Yeah, that what you just said. So so being in that kind of space where for me it was just behavior because I was acting out what I saw, happening at home. So had all these problems. And that really my self-esteem really took a hit. Like I didn't feel like I fit. I was very confused a lot. So I wanted to shed light on that because a lot of times, this, like our childhood shows up in our adulthood, right?
Yes.
So I want to move to this. It was one more thing you said. You talked about deconstructing. Tell us more about that. And the reason why I'm asking, because I don't know if have you ever heard of Christian A. Smith?
Yes.
We had
Yes.
him on a couple of weeks ago. And what I love about Christian is that he created conversation. He brought clarity within the conversation because I didn't realize that I had been deconstructing since 2019. I knew I was in this process. I knew it was lonely. I knew I was losing people. When you start deconstructing, people treat you like you left Jesus. And I'm like, no, I am
Yeah.
releasing and letting go of the harmful theology that no longer aligns with who I am and who I believe I am in God and who God is. I'm
Yes.
all that I'm disassociating from. But tell us your process journey to deconstructing.
So I relate to you 100% on that. I have a little bit of a complicated religious or faith background. So I grew up in a mixed religion family household. My mom and her nuclear family and even a lot of her extended relatives were Baptists. And so like from age birth to 10, I was like going to Baptist church pretty much full time. And Baptists tend to be a lot more relaxed in their views relatively under the Christianity umbrella. Um, I always joke with my mom. It seems like everybody's going to heaven almost no matter what they did. I'm like, who's going to hell if everybody's going to heaven? That's like so funny to me. And I'm like, I'd much rather it be that way than the opposite, which I experienced from about age 11 to about 23 when I was going to the Kingdom Hall at varying intensities with my dad's side of the family. They were Jehovah's Witnesses or JWs for short. Um, they are actually. My dad does not like actively practice. Honestly, he never really actively practiced, but I spent a lot of time with his mother and his sisters who did actively practice. So like that's how I got roped into that. And they were the opposite of my mom's side of the family, where it was like every little thing you did could like jeopardize your salvation, and it was just so intense all the time. And like I went in varying intensities throughout that 11 to 23. Like at some points I was super active, at other points I was like barely coming, just trekking along. So after a majorly traumatic falling out that happened in my early 20s between me and some other people, a whole bunch of rumors were being spread about me. Most of it wasn't even true, heavily exaggerated, smeared my name, lost a best friend of 20 years and all the relationships associated with her, caused a lot of tension with my relatives who were going, and they did not stand up for me or support me in the way that I would have wanted them to. In fact, they directly were supporting the people who started my downfall there. A lot of the church leadership turned their backs on me. Not all of them, but a lot of them. A lot of other relationships I had with people I considered to be friends or mentors or whatever also fell apart slowly after that. So I eventually, after this happened over the course of maybe over a year or so, I just stopped going altogether. And when I stopped going altogether, because I had actually developed PTSD from everything that happened there, because I'm sure you can imagine, like, I left my mom's faith to join this faith. And this faith was way more intense and had way more stipulations than my mom's faith, just for, this to all blow up in my face.
What happened? Do you mind sharing what, when you say it blew up in your face, do you want to, whatever level of comfort, just to, for clarity for our listeners, if you feel comfortable. I don't want you to,
So essentially, I got into a bad falling out with somebody who had used to be my friend, but then as we grew older, we just kind of grew apart. But that person, like, thought that I was like trying to betray their trust and like steal somebody out of their camp and all of that. Their camp meaning like their close circle. And the whole situation was just like
blown out of
completely
proportion.
yes, completely misconstrued and like taken out of context. And then once they felt that I had really just stabbed them in the back like this and betrayed their trust by trying to steal somebody from their camp and bring them over to my side, like they then were just on like a war path, like
When you
on a
say camp, are
rampage.
you talking about bringing them, is it in relation to faith, like bringing them from one faith to another faith, or
Oh no, when I
friendship group?
get friendship group, yes.
Okay.
Friendship group, just their close circle in general. And this person was also somebody that they were like on and off dating on top of that. So that made it even worse.
Hmm.
But yeah, so they then at that point were just like on a war path. And honestly, like in the midst of the whole falling out, like I said some things that were probably overly harsh and didn't need to be said as well. So like I definitely didn't handle myself as maturely as I probably should have in that situation. But it all went to hell and turned into my reputation being drugged through the mud. It didn't matter that I spent 4 years in full-time ministry practically. It didn't matter that I had given up the chance of going away to college on university, like most of my peers had gotten to do outside of the org. Like both my sisters had got the chance to do, like a lot of my relatives on my mom's side got to do. Like I gave that up so that I could serve the church full time or the hall or whatever
Hmm. Hmm.
full time in ministry and all of that while I was like going to school locally and building a business and all of this. So after all of that happened, as I'm sure you can imagine, that was a lot for somebody in their early 20s, which I did end up getting PTSD from. I went through a period where at first I was like, okay, God can't be real. God can't be real if I did all of this just for this to blow up so like intensely in my face. When I left my mom's religion, which came with some backlash and some hell from her and her relatives,
Hmm.
relatively for my age, but they were certainly not happy campers. I left her religion to join this just for this to happen. And then through therapy and a little bit of time, I realized that it wasn't that I didn't believe God was real. I just had to separate that the God I was learning about while I was in the JW org was not a God that I wanted to serve in my adulthood. And that wasn't how I believe that my understanding of God really was to me.
Hmm.
So I then explored varying different branches of Christianity and spirituality and all of that. And I learned a lot of that also while I was in school, because I'm in school for a lot of this, because I went back to school and grad school and all of that. And eventually I just got to a point where I'm at now, where I was very enlightened. And I'm like, I think for me, it makes the most sense for me to identify as maybe a cultural Christian, because I still look to, Jesus as like my divine role model. I still believe a lot of the core principles of just being a good person that are in the Bible. Most of my family's Christian, a lot of them still go to church, all of that. I still feel at least loosely aligned with that more than any other major religion. But I also incorporate other parts of spirituality. So I don't just look at, you know, God, his son, the angels, that's it. I look at the universe as being a part of things, karma, you know, other types of spiritual beings that may exist. Like I look at it as being a little bit more integrative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so like I hate to say refreshing because you sharing your previous pain, but our stories, Dr. Calynn, is crazy. I have the same story. My mom's side was Christian, my dad's side was Jehovah Witness. I promise you, I cannot make this up. Like you could go find video. I write about it in my books. Yes, the exact. So I
What?
know what it's like to be. I grew up in holiness. I've been in Baptist, Pentecostal. I've been in all of them, right? Just a part of it,
Wow.
whether we were fellowshipping. So I knew how all of them work. And then I also know what it's like to go door to door and attend the Kingdom Hall with my grandparents. I promise you, it's crazy. When you first said that, I was trying to like keep my face straight so I didn't be a distraction. But I was just like, God, this is I'm like, God, you're just amazing. Like, and that's what I asked. I said, God, I want to have conversations with people, not so much where all our stories are alike, but where there can be a oneness. There can be this synergy that is released in the airways to the listeners. You know what I'm saying? Because even when we talk about deconstructing, that is a very painful process,
It
right?
is.
It's very painful, but I have concluded for me, and so I use this language. I'm like, I no longer engage in any religious organization. And it's crazy. I found that to be more palatable for people than saying I no longer go to church. And that's crazy, right? Because we still, even in that deconstructing, you still trying to make other people, you still have this part of you that trying to make other people feel comfortable. So, you know what I mean? Until, we can grow through it or whatever. But I could just say, oh, I don't go to church. But then I was like, I don't do organized religion. Because what I feel, Dr. Calynn, I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, it always breaks my heart when there are people who leave God, like no longer believe in Jesus, no longer believe in the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus because of his representatives,
Yeah.
right? The pastors, the preachers, your grandma, and all of them people. And what I'm most grateful for is the like early on, like my grandmother, my sister's grandmother was a bishop, like, and that was my grandma. And she taught me the power of prayer. It's just so many things that throughout the years, like I experienced God for myself. I've always been a very intuitive person, very prayerful, always journal. Like when all the kids was outside, I'm in the house writing in a journal and writing. Like I became an author, but I didn't, I would have never thought that. And so with that process, like it can just be so isolating because it's like, okay, I rock with Jesus, but some of his kids, I just can't no more. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I think there have been such poor representation. I'm like, for me, what kept me, because like you, I've been through a lot of things. There were some ministries I almost died in. But what kept me from walking away from my faith was I've experienced God in such a way that nobody can convince me he's not real. Nobody can convince me he don't love me, he didn't call me, he didn't choose me, that he don't walk with me. Because when I came out about my marriage where I was same gender loving and now my spouse is trans, like that was a process. Like people, because we tend to reject that in which we don't understand. Now I'm very open. I'm like, somebody, you could have inboxed me, we could talk about it. But you know how people are, kind of like what you went through. Instead of them coming to you trying to talk to you, they just go talk about you. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and so that can be a very painful process, but for me and for our listeners, for me, it was, I knew too much about him. Like, okay, I just won't affiliate with that. So I'm in a space in my life where I don't feel like I'm going to hell because I don't go to church on Sunday. I spent so much of my life doing that. Bible study, church, choir rehearsal, on the committee, a licensed minister, traveling, speaking, giving everything I got, only to come home depleted. Because one of the things that's not talked about enough, I believe, is self-care,
Yes.
self-preservation. What are your thoughts on that? And what are some things you feel like you've learned in that process of deconstructing?
I couldn't agree with you more. That's so crazy how we have such a similar background. I feel like it was meant for us to be brought together. I'm glad I reached out to you. And I agree with you that self-care is really missing from, I feel like most organized religion in general, in my studies in seminary and getting my religious trauma certification and social science and all of that, I feel like organized religion in general, even outside of Christianity, there is such a push to be community oriented that you almost always have to sacrifice the well-being of the individual for the sake of the greater good, which sometimes is warranted, but it shouldn't have to be all the time, right? So I feel like, especially when you're involved in ministry, that mentality is ingrained deeply in you. Like, you have to always put others before yourself. So you end up neglecting your self care. And
Mm-hmm.
then you end up with, like, exhaustion, resentment, and bitterness because, like, you haven't poured into yourself, but you're pouring into everybody else. You're depleted.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, that's definitely a big factor as well. And I feel like in my deconstruction journey, to your point, it was also painful because to have been a part by the age of 23, to have been a part of and left two major Christian denominations, the Baptists and the JWs, and now you're just kind of like, do I even believe in God anymore? That's a lot to
Mm-hmm.
sit with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that, like I say, through therapy, through reading, through education, through just natural growth and maturation, like I eventually got to where I am now, where I'm like, no, I still think I'm, a cultural Christian. I'm a very like open-minded, flexible Christian. I think that, Christian universalism is really interesting to me, or like Christ consciousness and that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. I just don't, to your point, I don't want to deal with a church home. I don't want to be a part of a congregation. I don't want the politics. Don't want the gossiping. I don't want any of that. But I personally, for myself, I still identify, loosely as a Christian, and I'm okay with that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that I got through that pain to get to where I am now.
Mm-hmm. One more thing I'll say about deconstruction or deconstructing is I don't know if you went through this, whether it was with school or your own personal study, but in that process, once I like, because what happens is you realize, okay, I know for me, I ended up in a place for a long time I was engaging in the work, but didn't have the word. I didn't know it was called deconstructing. I just knew I shut everything down, shut all the voices down, because this was what led me to this was preparing to marry my partner. Right. And so I'm like, God, like, if I'm wrong, let me know. Da, 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 da. And I know I got a relationship with God. I've seen him move in my life. And so in this process of now I know deconstructing, I'm doing research and I found myself getting so frustrated because I came across in my own study, and like I tell people when they're like, well, how do you study the Bible? I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of tools and resources that help you study the Bible. I said, but I just think there are some core things you need to keep in mind. Like for me, I always ask God, God, give me revelation knowledge, give me wisdom and understanding of what your word is, what your word said, historical context, what it is saying to me now, present moment, and help me to exegete it properly so that I can apply it to my life. And so the frustration came because I realized so many texts are taught out of context, which
Yes.
changes everything. You know what I'm saying? Even when I have conversations with people about like, okay, the word homosexuality didn't come into it wasn't even originally there. It was pedophilia. People don't be ready for that conversation. So what happens, we become what you call them, like we become these curse breakers, but we become isolated too because we're disruptors. That's what I'm looking for. We become disruptors, and there are certain conversations that people are not ready to have, right? And so I don't know, for you, did you find yourself, was it like, oh, I'm just enlightened? Like I was getting frustrated because I'm like, I didn't have to suffer. I didn't have to, like, this is out of context and that is out of context and this is what this really means. And that doesn't, you know what I mean? And just focus it, like, they will make religious people will make Paul's words Bible. I'm like, nah, Jesus didn't say that. Paul said that. You know what I'm saying? Better to marry than to burn. So you got all these people
Yes.
that just run and get married. And I'm like, or women aren't supposed to speak. Contextually, where they were, the women weren't allowed to speak culturally. and they said, go home and ask your husbands, right? And they just took that and created, it's like, and it's so many things like that. So there was a time like where I started, I had to take a break because I was like, okay, God, I'm getting frustrated and angry. Did you experience that, or was that just me?
You know, I it's so crazy that you are so much on the same page as me. I did. I experienced a similar feeling when I really studied religion as a whole, not just specifically this one denomination under the Christianity umbrella or these two, but like religion as a whole and social science as a whole and learning about all of those things at such an in-depth level when I went back to school and, furthered my education and all of that. I was like, wow. And I made this point actually to my dad, although I could tell it was a bit jarring for him, but I made this point to him about a year or so ago where I told him that there is truth in all religions, and that while there is truth in all religions, some are better than others, and not everyone is a fit for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very like, put off by that because especially with, him being raised JW, they drill it into your head. We're the only real Christians. We're the only ones Jesus is coming back to save and all of that. Like everybody else getting destroyed. So like, even though he never in his adulthood really actively practiced, maybe for a few years here and there, like for the most part, he was just kind of off in the wind doing whatever he wanted to do, like spiritually speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell that was kind of hard for him to process. Like, what do you mean? Like, there's some truth in our religions. What do you mean everything isn't for everyone? What do you mean, like there's varying levels of acceptability to
Mm-hmm.
God in terms of spiritual practice? Like what? And I feel like once that clicked for me, it was a little upsetting. It was a little upsetting because I'm like, wow, I spent over a decade in the JW specifically because when I was a Baptist, I was a kid. I was 10 and under. But I'm like, I spent the first several years of my young adulthood and all of my teenagehood in the Kingdom Hall. And I got very upset. And I'm like, for so long, this was taught to me as the only true religion and the only way to salvation when you look at religion as a whole, like as a whole, not just even under Christianity, but as a whole, there's good and bad in everything. So like for me, that didn't come easy, but once I had the epiphany and I sat with it, I'm so glad I like that it happened.
Mm-hmm. And then it becomes liberating. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying? And then you just have to realize like, okay, whew, all right, I might need a break from that. That was a bit much.
yes.
I want to go back to depression, right? What do you wish more people understood about it, especially when it comes to high achieving women of color who are still expected to push and persevere through everything?
I think that people need to, this is my biggest plight with chronic mental health conditions, i.e., mental illness, but mental illness is stigmatized. So my plight with that in general is that it shows up different in everybody, and I wish more people understood that because the same way so many people around me were like, they didn't exactly say this, but their essential reaction was like, "There's no way in hell." That there's something wrong with her. She's so smart. She's social. Like she has a lot of friends. There's no way. I wish people understood that it shows up differently in everybody. Not every person who's dealing with a chronic mental health condition is going to be underachieving. Not every person who deals with a chronic mental health condition is going to be so incapacitated by that condition that they can't function or do anything. That's not how it works. Even when you look at like something like substance use disorder, which runs in my family, I come from a fairly long line of people who abused alcohol and
Mm-hmm.
other things here and there, myself included. I had about a 2 year bout in my early 20s where I was an alcoholic, so like just because you can still go to work doesn't mean you don't have a problem. So like
Mm-hmm.
if you're getting drunk every day or almost every day just to function, drunk, high, whatever it is, that's a problem. If it's not, like
Mm-hmm.
like you're not prescribed that by your doctor. Like I would never tell
Right.
somebody if they were prescribed something by their doctor not to take it. But yeah, that's my biggest thing. I just wish people understood that it looks different in everybody.
I know for me, My first time hearing about functional, or is it functioning depression?
High
Functioning or
functioning, yes.
high functioning depression was when we lost Chelsea, Miss USA 2019,
Oh, I
when
took that
she
so hard.
jumped from, what was it, a 19-story building? You know what I'm saying? It felt, for me, it felt so unreal. Her, Twitch, all of that. You right? You remember Twitch from the Ellen? Like
Yes.
I love Twitch. He was always laughing and joking. And to know he committed suicide, it's like, for me, like that was my first time hearing about functioning or high functioning depression. And it just it was just so heartbreaking. Like, so many people focused on how beautiful Chelsea was, right?
Yes.
And that's why I tell people, I'm like, depression doesn't have one look.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't have a look. So how do you balance giving yourself grace and taking care of yourself and minding your mental health while pursuing these big vision and goals that you have? Like, what do you have to do for yourself to keep you, leveled, grounded, and centered?
Well, I think for me, and I'm sure you can relate, being a Black woman who's a career woman, dealing with chronic mental health condition, all of that, it has so many layered challenges
Mm-hmm.
that come with that. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I think a couple of things are one, I am very intentional to engage in my self care, whether that's traveling, whether that's shopping, going out to eat. I love live entertainment. Almost every week, I'm going to a show, an art gallery, a movie, something to get me out of the house.
Yes.
Um, and then, those like self-reflective activities. So journaling, working in planners, doing activity books, like all of those kinds of things really help me. And then therapy, that's probably the biggest of them all. I'm in one-on-one therapy regularly, and I do group therapy for myself, not just as the practitioner, but as the patient, as the
Mm-hmm.
recipient of services. And then last but not least, well, two things: having a good support system. So, got to shout them out, family, friends, all of that. And then, last but not least, having that regular spiritual sustenance of like believing in a higher power and knowing that there's something beyond this world. So,
Mm-hmm.
those are my things.
I love it. So, was it your personal journey with depression that influenced your passion for holistic mental health and advocacy work? Is that where it came from? Tell us about that.
Yes, definitely. I feel like the way we just related so well on how depression and mental health conditions just look so different in everybody. I think for me, one, growing up in a low income neighborhood where I saw so many people who could have really benefited from help if they would have had access to it, that really motivated me to,
Mm-hmm.
start
Mm-hmm.
something where I could raise awareness about that. And then also just knowing how so many people were overlooked. They were clearly struggling, but in plain sight. Like
Mm-hmm.
people took, okay, maybe there's, let's say Johnny, he's having a lot of behavioral issues like you described. He's having a lot of behavioral issues or whatever. So he just must, not be a good student. He must be a bad kid. Like let's just write him off. And I'm like, or maybe Johnny is dealing with a lot of issues at home that are then causing him to act out at school. Or maybe he has very poor relationships with, his caregivers, and he doesn't know how to resolve conflict peacefully because they don't resolve it peacefully with him. So he comes to school and doesn't know how to resolve it with his peers, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing, my own story and then stories of so many people, I grew up around, I think that's my motivating force.
Yeah, mine too. And even listening to you talk about that, that was a big thing for me. Like once I got older, as you get older, you continue to grow, you process, you reflect. And I'm like, not one teacher asked, what's going on at home? What's
Yes.
happening? What's going on? It was no, let's put her on medication, let's put her in this classroom, let's throw her over here. You know what I mean? Now you've
And did
created
you
something. Go ahead.
did you have access to a school counselor?
So I don't remember seeing a school counselor. I remember being in a like going to therapy, having to go talk to this lady, and I did not like talking to her because I felt it wasn't explained. It was just I was just
Yes.
kind of shoved into it. You know what I mean? So fighting these the mindset of something is wrong with me, something is wrong with me. So I had to do a lot of self-affirming work to get to reframe and rid myself of those beliefs. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, and that's why even the people I talk to now within the community that I have, Healing Conversations community and etc., I tell them for those that are teachers, I'm like, talk to these kids. Like even within our family dynamic, like when I go around Sean's, my spouse's family, I'm always with the kids. And he be like, you just always with the kids. I said, they really have they be having some heavy hearts and a lot to
Yeah.
share. They just need somebody to listen to them, And even with my daughter, like when she was in college, she graduated a year ago with her
In
bachelor's.
college,
Oh yeah, my daughter's
look
23,
great.
girl.
Oh, you look great. You must have been a young mom.
I was 18.
You look fabulous.
Thank you. But even with her, like when she was in college, her friends would come over. I would be right out there with them, and they would talk, and we would talk like real life, like not just oh they kids, they ain't talking about nothing. No, they would really talk and share. And I'm like, when I was younger, I wish I had that. I wish someone had
Yes.
asked what's happening because in the black family is what happens in this house stays in this
Yes.
house, right? So we protect predators, we
Yes.
protect incest, we don't talk about
Yes.
abuse, we don't talk, and I feel like that is so selfish because a lot of times, even if you don't know what to do with it, you got to do something,
Yeah.
right? But what, and then people will throw religion in it. Um, God is your vindicator. Vengeance is mine, said the Lord. No, that nigga need to be in jail. He need to get
Yeah.
locked up. Yeah,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that? Like, there's an anger that comes with me where I be like protecting predators, like, and it shows up in religion. Like
Yeah.
even with men seem like they can go sleep with whoever, whatever, and they will get a slap on the wrist. But women, oh, don't let her get pregnant. Oh,
Yeah.
honey, Leandria, oh, don't let her be smoking no cigarettes and cussing. Oh, we gotta shut her down. Oh, but y'all was using her gift all that time, and you could probably, if you walked in discernment, you could discern what was happening, but you were so focused on monetizing off of her gift that you really could have helped her. Prophet, pastor, apostle, reverend doctor.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think I think that of a lot of things are learned and passed down through generations that and me and my mom actually had a similar conversation, not specifically within the context of religion, but just about how a lot of practices that get passed down
Mm-hmm.
and then are enacted by elders upon their subordinates, whether they're their kids, their grandkids, whoever,
Mm-hmm.
it's not intentionally harmful or intentionally abusive, but the intention doesn't change the impact. So just
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't mean to be harmful to them or abusive or neglectful to them, that doesn't mean that you weren't. It just means
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't intend to do that. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that kind of logic is historical. It's a part of generational trauma within minority communities because we're so used to only having our family and having to keep that unit together, especially if it's a man, because, it's not that long ago that women weren't allowed to work and have bank accounts and credit cards. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's learned behavior that is passed down. But I really wish, especially in today's day and age where we as women no longer have to rely on men, in most cases, I
Mm-hmm.
wish that we would break that chain and stop that, stinking thinking. Because
Mm-hmm.
I know when I have a child one day, I want to raise them where if anybody in this house is preventing you from getting help or getting the support you need, you can speak up on it, even if that person is me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if we promoted that more in minority communities, a lot of people would be a lot better off.
I agree. I agree. It just can be so heartbreaking. Like one of my mentors, Joyce Meyer, she talks about being um molested by her dad for most of her childhood. Um,
I've watched some of her sermons.
I've had clients women who were molested for most of their childhood by their mothers, so it'd be so painful, which also is what, when I say painful, meaning the empathetic part of me, it's just like, oh, like So when I see people say things about moms and they're like, you need to honor your mother, you need to, I was like, y'all can't do that. You can't do that because everybody don't have that kind of mama. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they are not being a good child. They just they don't have that they don't have that connection even though they desire it. Right? And I don't know if I told you, but I've been doing trauma informed coaching for a really, really long time. But 2012, I started out coaching, but now I've been in school. I'm a newbie. I went back to school in October of last year. So I was 40. I turned 41 this year. I was 40, went back to school at 40. And I am in school for psychology to get my bachelor's. My goal is to go all the way up to get my doctorate. So y'all pay attention. Listen, I'm gonna go from
Yay!
Coach C to Dr. C. You understand? But for me, the most important reason why I chose to do that is because, as you know, coaching is out of pocket. And there are so many within the marginalized community that need mental health. And I was like, I want to be able to accept insurance. I don't want, oh, they can't afford it. And I also want to incorporate family therapy. I feel like I've worked so much with individuals over the years, and there was so many times I'd be like, "Oh, I wish I could talk to their husband. I wish I could talk to their kid. I wish I could." And so that over time showed me, like even in my own healing journey, that passion for family trauma therapy. I want to do that because it's there's so many layers. It's so many things that we don't understand. And a lot of times, have you found this to be true? Like you can be talking to like maybe two or three people like within a family dynamic, and all three of them really are saying the same thing, but they're not
Yeah.
hearing it the same because from where each person is standing, their perspective is their perspective, right? So I remember, I don't know if you've seen this on Instagram. It was like two people standing, and then there was a number six, right? So from one person's perspective, it was a six. From the other person's perspective, it was a nine. They arguing back and forth. It's a six, it's a nine. You both are right.
Yeah.
And now how do we reconcile? How do we navigate? What do you need to be able to heal and move on from that? And I think, what do you think about? I'm so enjoying talking to you. I'm sorry. Are you on a time limit?
No, I'm not. I'm
Okay.
enjoying this.
When I do the podcast, I just like to do it like we just talking, conversations. Um, I don't forgot the question I was asking. Let's go to this. You've created something remarkable. I really, really want to make sure we get to this, which is the holistic healing source for marginalized society. Tell us more about that and why it's so important for you to focus on the marginalized communities.
Thank you. Thank you. So for me with that, it's been a long time in the making. This is what I went back to school to do. I really wanted to further the impact I could have on society. And when I started going back to school, I was working in pediatrics. I was a behavioral therapist working with children all the way from like age 3 to maybe like teenagers. And I realized, I said, okay, direct practice isn't for me. While I gained a lot of skills doing that, I said this is something that requires a level of it requires a level of pliability that I don't always want to have because especially when you're working with children, while they have the most potential to grow because they're so young, when you have to deal with parents and then like
Yeah, my
clinically.
level of patience, my patience level.
Yeah, and it's like what's best for the kid isn't always what's going to be recommended for you to do as the therapist because of, different like political things and behind the
Hmm.
scenes. I was like, okay, this isn't for me. So I then said, okay, instead of direct practice, I'm going to go back to school because I want to launch. I had already been in the media space for so many years and a writer and an editor and a cable TV host and blogger and all of that. So I was like, I'm going to launch an arm of my media company that focuses specifically on the holistic healing and social justice of marginalized populations. So BIPOC, women, queer, disabled. And I went to school, took quite a few years, did all of that. And then I finally launched it with a lot of work behind the scenes. And now here we are. We just launched our free online library with, I think, 8 journals, activity books, planners,
Yay.
workbooks. Thank you. And I think a couple of guides in there too. And that was a few months in the making as well because I said I recognize that, you know a lot of these books have really helped me and a lot of other people throughout their
Mm-hmm.
therapy journey when paired with working with a professional. But so many people I talk to, when I'm like, hey, have you checked out this journal, or have you checked out this or checked out that? They're like, Calynn, I'm a single mom on food stamps who's barely able to pay my bills. I don't have $25 for this journal you're talking about, or, oh, Calynn, like, I don't have like I don't have insurance to begin with. I got denied for my medical card. So this workbook you're suggesting that you're supposed to go through with your therapist, I don't have a therapist in the first place. And just I ran into a lot of
A lot
people
of
having,
red tape.
yes, financial barriers. So I said, how about we have a starter library where you can get that stuff printed out, wherever you print it out, for free. So that's when I came up with that goal. And while the books in our library are meant to be beginner books, like they're not for the people like me, for example, who've been in therapy half their life, and have, gone to school for this and all of that, like, or even like for somebody like you, they're not for people like us. They're for people who are just starting off, or, if they're not just starting off, like they haven't maybe ventured into like the self-help realm. Maybe they've
Mm-hmm.
just been going to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
But even that is good for me.
Absolutely. Can you tell us what some of the topics are? Like, do you know that some of the topics that's within the library, just so the listeners can have an idea and definitely share the website?
Yes. So the website is holistichealingsource.org. And that's also our social media handle, Holistic Healing Source. That's holistichealingsource.org for the website. And there is a holistic mental health book that has a lot of prompts related to anxiety, stress, depression. There's a trauma processing workbook that is for acute, chronic, and complex trauma. There is a self-care planner. There's a self-control activity book. There's a manifestation guide, a dream journal, a prayer journal, um, oh, and a neurodivergent academic planner. So that's 8 different books, and
I
they all
love that. Go ahead.
thank you. And they all can be, downloaded. That like we don't need any contact or payment info. That's another barrier I didn't want. A lot of people I know, they're like, I'm not putting my credit card in, or I'm not giving my email to these people. Like, even if it's free, they don't want to have to do all that.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
literally can just go straight on the website, click it, download it, print it at your house or at your library or at your school or wherever you print your stuff and
Mm-hmm.
get started.
I love that. I love, love, love that. So I'm definitely going to make sure that I have, say the website one more time.
It's holistichealingsource.org.
Yes. I want to ask you a question. So you mentioned something earlier, which has been a concern of mine, like the politics, because I tell people every industry has politics, right? And I ended up becoming like really good friends with my therapist. And she was getting out of like, she was going into like, she was working in a practice, but she's leaving. I see a lot of people leaving, like working within a facility to opening up a private practice. Right.
Yes.
And I'm like, is it because I hear so much about the politics, and I'm just like, whoa, like that's why I want to talk to you offline too. Because I'm like, I'm going to school for this, which I said licensed therapist, but with your psychology degree, you can do so much. I was just like, you know what? I'm thinking that aligns. I don't know. I might want to go be a professor at a college or be a guidance counselor. I don't know. But what do some of those politics look like for those of us who are maybe either in school for psychology or something similar, or considering like maybe like the pros and cons, because I hear this quite often from other mental health professionals.
Well, sometimes it's a matter of customer service or client service. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what's not always best for the progress of the client or patient, depending on which language they use at your place of employment,
Mm-hmm.
what's best for them in terms of making progress towards their goals isn't always going to be prioritized for the sake of customer client service. So in my case, working with kids, pediatrics, like the client is the child, but because the parents are the ones paying, you have to do a certain amount of appeasing to the parents that isn't always optimal for the child. So, for example, like when you're working in behavioral therapy,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I say, okay, I don't want, let's say their name is Timmy. I don't want Timmy to participate in the group movie night because Timmy has thrown several tantrums, tried to fight his peers, tore up the playroom. I don't then want to positively reinforce negative or maladaptive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Timmy needs to sit in his room and do trials where we're,
Mm-hmm.
working out of the workbook or whatever. Like Timmy doesn't
Mm-hmm.
need to do the movie night. But the parent, because they are just automatically defensive of their child, they don't want them left out and all of that. They're like, no, no, he needs to go to the movie night. And then like leadership may feel scared to lose that family for financial reasons, like they may be
Mm-hmm.
scared to lose the family. So they then, try and come up with these solutions that are maybe more in the middle. And like you just don't always agree with that. Now, not
Mm-hmm.
every single client is going to be like that, but
Mm-hmm.
it happened frequently enough for me to be like, and not just to me, but to other people that I went.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, this direct practice thing isn't for me. So when I say politics, that's really what I mean. Now, if you're working with adults, I imagine it would be a little bit easier because the person who's paying you is the person who's your client. So it's not so many people involved. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, that can get a little messy too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how, in your opinion, how does holistic mental health, social justice, and spiritual care connect in your line of work?
So for me, with the holistic healing source, we wanted it to be at the intersection of all of those things. And the advocacy work that I tend to do, for example, my doctoral research project was about holistic prison programming that would reduce recidivism by healing the whole person, the whole inmate, meaning the spiritual, the mental and academic, the emotional, and also just like preparing them for life in general through resources like housing and employment and
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when you look at issues like legal system reform and reducing recidivism, that involves all of those things. Or when you look at a lot of feminist issues, women empowerment and women's health, like a lot of those issues intersect. Like a lot of our rights are being taken away,
Mm-hmm.
reproductive freedoms and all of that. When you look at racial community healing, when you look at how action was overturned by the Supreme Court and how DEI is being strucken down and illegal now, and just all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to like the disparities that we're having within our local churches and things like that. And they're not necessarily the most welcoming, accepting, liberal spaces to be in. So it's just like so many parts of our existence contain all of those things. So for me, that's what the holistic healing source was meant to do.
I love that. And where are you located?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
You in Chicago. Oh, that's right, because you what was it? You grew up on the south side of Chicago like the Obamas.
Yes. And now I live in technically a suburb. I live in Crestwood, but most of the work I do is within the actual city of Chicago.
Well, I've never been to Chicago.
It's nice. You should come.
Yeah, I've never been to Chicago. What I only got two more questions. Well, technically one, but what encouragement would you offer to listeners who are struggling, whether with depression, identity, or some of these social issues that you have mentioned, or anything that we talked about today, like, or just even finding their place in the world? People are carrying so much. Just take a moment and share whatever is on your heart to our listeners.
I would say definitely if that's you and you're struggling with any kind of mental health condition or existential dread or anything like that, definitely check out NAMI. So NAMI .org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They are phenomenal. They have locations across the country with virtual services, over the phone services, and in-person services. NAMI.org. And they're free. They're completely free. I use their services all the time. I'm also like, um, in the running for their state board of directors in Illinois. I've been using their services for a while now. I even worked there briefly one summer. So I would say start there. It's a great place to meet other people. They have all kinds of specialized like groups too. They have queer groups, BIPOC groups, all like really, really, really utilize that. Like NAMI is a lifesaver for anyone who's struggling with their mental health, their overall just figuring out where they fit in life. Check them
Hmm.
out.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Now tell people where they can find you online and social media world, your website, anything you want to promote at this time. Feel free. We would love to support you.
Thank you. Thank you. You can check me out on social media, Calynn Lawrence. So Callynn, and then Lawrence, Lawrence. And then for the Holistic Healing Source specifically, that's holistichealingsource.org. And on social media, we're at Holistic Healing Source.
I love that. Now, is there anything as we prepare to say our byes for now. Is there anything on your heart that you would like to share with our listeners at this time? Maybe whether it's something in reference to your story or something that's on your heart that you wanted to share and we didn't get to. I just always like to create space at the end for our guests to lead the pouring, like, to close us out.
Well, I would just like to say, firstly, thank you for listening. Second of all, you are not alone. Like I say, check out NAMI, check out my website, check out the lovely podcasts and content that you create, interviewing all these people from different fields and focusing on that holistic healing for women. Um, be proactive if you can in grabbing your mental health by the reins and trying to improve because unfortunately, especially under this current administration, we can't expect too many people to come save us. So
Hmm.
if you are struggling, please be proactive. Check out those resources that are online or free or easily accessible. Utilize whatever you can find so that you will find hope and not give up.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely enjoyed sharing space with you today. I hope it was as refreshing and liberating. I definitely want to talk to you more offline. Just love, love, love everything that you're doing. And I just pray that God will continue to enlarge your territories, continue to use you as a voice, a beacon of light and strength. And even love to those that's on this journey, still trying to figure it out. Because the healing journey can be messy, right? You
Yes.
feel like you took 10 steps forward and you took 30 back, and the mind can mess with you and feel like you got to start over. That's not the case. So we definitely honor you. We thank you so much for joining us today. And guys, y'all know how we close out. Thank you so much for listening. What happened to you may not be your fault, but healing is your responsibility. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.